Big props to Audible for sponsoring this video in order to save Christmas. Recently, it came to my attention that in honor of Avengers Endgame, there was this big film YouTuber assembly project called One Marvelous Scene, with every prominent film YouTuber being invited to do this. You know, every prominent film YouTuber except fucking me. Oh, what a beautiful day to go on the internet. Let's log in and see what's happening out there today. No. 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 Well, here we go again. We have a bunch of other prominent film YouTubers banding together to talk about some of the most positive Star Wars moments. And just like it was back in my school days, I once again was not cool enough to be included. So I'll do what I did last time and start my own project, which is about the opposite. Not Star Trek, but the worst Star Wars moments. And for that, we have to go to none other than Rogue One. To be fair, this movie as a whole is not exactly a failure. It was mostly liked by audiences and it also made a respectable amount of money for a spin-off, and the second half of it is actually pretty strong. We have a clear plot that speeds forward, we have great visuals and action and a few pretty great characters as well. The villain, for example. Here's a guy who's obsessed to build this weapon of mass destruction and then ultimately gets destroyed by it. That's close to perfect storytelling right there. But with the first half of the film, specifically the beginning, it's a different story. The beginning of Rogue One is the biggest mess I've ever seen in any Star Wars movie. And when I say the beginning, I don't mean one specific part of it, I mean the entire first act, from adult Jyn Erso's introduction to when she meets Saw Gerrera. Not exactly a single moment, but it's my show, so I make the rules. As I'm sure you're already aware, there was a bunch of behind-the-scenes drama with this movie when Disney was obsessively racing to change things at the last minute. And even though the ending did improve from it, it clearly came at the cost of the beginning. Because to be harsh, with all the most central narrative crimes Rogue One in the beginning commits, the first act here is the worst first act as any first act can be. It actually shares quite a few similarities with the opening of Suicide Squad, only in an even worse way. And so, let's see what Rogue One did to accomplish that. Let's see how to fail at beginning your movie. I could have talked about something positive, but because once again I wasn't invited— oh wait, I was invited. Oh. Never mind. The war is on. Positive Star Wars moments versus negative Star Wars moments. Choose your side. I know it's a bit of a cliche now to criticize the new female heroes of Star Wars, but here I'd say it's unavoidable. See, no matter what you might think of Rey, she honestly is like the greatest character of all time compared to Rogue One's Jyn Erso. Because in the first act, Jyn Erso is the worst type of a hero possible. She's a passive hero. What that means is that Jyn Erso is someone who doesn't actively pursue anything in a way that would push the plot. She doesn't have objectives, she doesn't have desires or motives or agendas, she doesn't have anything. In other words, she's not a hero, she's not a character, she's just an empty shell pushed by the plot.
What is this?
She escapes prison and goes to meet the rebels, because she's broken out by the rebels and taken there. She sets out on a quest to find Saw Gerrera, because the rebels order her to do so. I mean, Jyn has around 15 scenes in the first act, and just guess how many of those scenes does she spend either behind bars or tied up and escorted by others.
I've taken them this far.
Take them away.
Wait, you can't take them.
Anyone who kills me and my friends will answer to Saw Gerrera.
Kajikena. Dingadase.
Because Jyn has no desire to chase any destination or objective whatsoever herself, she cannot make any choices or actions to show the audience who she is. We know where she comes from, but not who she is. And if we don't know who she is, we can't create feelings for her or take interest in her. And therefore, same with the movie itself, which makes watching this movie the equivalent of watching grass grow. Plus, if the main hero of your movie doesn't care about anything that your movie is about, why would the audience care? Why even issue the hero of your movie to begin with? You could argue that Jyn is doing all this for a reason, that her objective is to help the rebels in order to get free.
We're up against the clock here, girls, so if there's nothing to talk about, we'll just put you back where we found you.
And if I do it,
We'll make sure you go free.
But even that argument falls apart right after, when she's entirely by herself. If she really so badly wanted to go free, why doesn't she just run off? Why would she need someone else's permission to go free? Especially when this movie has tried so hard to establish her as this independent warrior. And before you say that she's using the rebels to find her father, that would be pretty great, but she clearly isn't.
They wanted an introduction, they've got it. I'm out now. Rest of you can do what you want.
In addition to everything being boring and uninteresting, this passivity problem also makes situations seem undeserved and unjustified. When Jin gets in a tough spot and saves the day by wielding a blaster like a master, it just feels like cheating, because we've never seen her even shoot a blaster before. And why would she have, since she doesn't care about anything enough to have had a reason to do so? The only choice-based action that gives us a little peek into Jin as a person in the first act is when she saves this random kid from being killed in a crossfire. But even that is such a disconnected, rudimentary Hollywood save the cat moment seen in every single movie today that she might as well have saved an actual random cat.
Hey, you guys.
I've never had the luxury of political opinions.
Aside from just that one tiny moment, adult Jin Erso in the first act is a fully passive, unmotivated, uninteresting, empty shell. And the only reason we even know she exists is because that's one of the things this film lists out about her.
You're currently calling yourself Liana Halleck. Possession of unsanctioned weapons, forgery of imperial documents, aggravated assault, escape from custody,
where was this movie?
Arrest.
Much like in Suicide Squad, the first act in Rogue One is also the kind where most of the information is delivered to the audience verbally, without it having been backed up visually. In other words, it's one of those movies.
Why does she get a blaster and I don't?
What?
I know how to use it. What's with the destroyer?
It's because of your old friend, Saw Gerrera. He's been attacking the cargo shipments.
Rez Ahmed was once the most devoted guardian of us all.
Aggravated assault, escape from custody, resisting arrest.
If saying it would only make it so.
Plus, there's also a bunch of verbal information where we have no perception of what it even means. The Kyber crystals, which we haven't seen yet, are the fuel for the Death Star, which we haven't seen to be the case either. This kind of stuff where the words are just meaningless noise.
Who are they?
The guardians of the Wills. Protectors of the Kyber Temple.
Say that again!
I said more that's right.
What the f are you saying?
But the reason this issue is even more massive in Rogue One is because it not only verbally introduces some tiny random pieces of information, it also does so with the actual central plot. Basically, the plot of Rogue One is that we have this Imperial pilot who, thanks to Jin Erso's dad, defects to the rebel side to deliver vital info about the Death Star. And now it's up to the rebels and Jin to use this info to find its weakness that her dad planted. In of itself, this is all great, and it works great at the end. But in the beginning, there's just one tiny issue. None of this is shown. We never see the pilot have any kind of relationship with Jin's dad. We never see him actually escape the Empire and defect to the rebel side. We never even see anything to prove that he really is an Imperial pilot, other than the clothing he wears. All we do is hear occasional offhanded mentions of this stuff happening.
An Imperial pilot. One of the cargo drivers he defected yesterday is telling people they're making a weapon.
There's an Imperial defector in Jeddah, a pilot. He's claiming the Emperor is creating a weapon.
We've heard word of rumors circulating through the city. Apparently, you've lost a rather talkative cargo pilot.
And the problem this invisible plot creates is that it makes the beginning very unbelievable and confusing. We hear a bunch of talk about the seemingly huge turn of events, but we never actually see any of it, so it must not be that huge after all. I mean, I'm usually pretty good at following plot, but the first time I saw this film, even I had trouble understanding what was going on. Because all I was seeing was that this random guy appeared out of nowhere, saying that he defected from a side I'd never seen him on to begin with, and that he was holding information I'd never seen him having or getting. And that's not good. I'm sorry to be harsh, but that's failing at storytelling 101. That's like having a revenge movie like Kill Bill, where it's never shown what the hero is trying to get revenge for. Plus, it's not like the filmmakers here didn't know this was a problem either. They clearly did, because they tried to back up and justify the pilot's background with this alien thing that apparently reads minds and will know the truth and whatever. But even that was pretty dumb, because even though it was said that the alien leaves everyone it touches insane, that never visually happened here either. Like, what? I genuinely cannot understand why you couldn't just show this stuff. You already have a movie that we don't care about, and now you're deliberately making it into a movie that we also get confused by. Not a great idea. Honestly, all things considered, it seems like the first act of Rogue One was made to be watched by blind people. Even though, of course, I'm all for inclusivity and whatever, that just seems a bit weird to me.
He's rigged a trap inside it. That's why he sent you, to bring that message.
Where is it? Where's the message?
Everything happened so fast.
Did you see it?
You don't believe me?
I believe her. That's good to know.
The last point I'm gonna bring up is not as much of a new problem as much as it is the source for all the earlier problems we talked about. And that is the fact that Rogue One very clearly doesn't consider its beginning as a potential playground to explore, but instead as an unavoidable swamp to quickly hop over. What I mean is that the scenes that we see in the first act aren't actually full individual scenes, they're just brief exposition-oriented moments. They're not anchored in the point of view of a specific character, they're anchored in tiny separate pieces of information that they hold. For example, look at adult Jin's quote-unquote introductory scene. The only purpose this scene serves is to show that Jin is now grown up and in prison. Other than that, it's completely worthless. No choice-based actions that are made, no obstacles that are overcome, nothing. And that's why it's not a scene, it's a tiny informational moment, which is exactly what this first act is made up of. We have a moment showing that the pilot other people have talked about exists, and it's about nothing else. We have a moment where the rebels come to break Jin out, and it's about nothing else. Followed by a moment about just more exposition, followed by a moment about just even more exposition, and so on. To be fair, there are some scenes as well, like with Cassian's introduction.
No! What have you done? I'll never climb out of here, my arm!
Get out of the way.
Calm down. Calm down. You'll be all right.
Not only does Cassian's choice to execute his ally clearly visually establish who he is as a person, it also shows us that he is someone who could actually kill Jin's dad for the cause later on. That's great, but the issue is that the scene is so disjointed from everything else, because instead of the beginning being anchored in a specific point of view, we're hopping all around the galaxy like a bad Bourne movie on crack. And that is why this entire beginning feels like such a mess. How can we ever get into Jin as a character when we're not given any time to spend with her? How can we ever begin to understand the plot when we're not given any time with it? The answer is, we can't. And I guarantee you, if instead of jumping from one planet to another every 30 seconds, we glued these separate events together and set them in one place, it would have fixed everything. As an example, what if the entire opening section was about a prison breakout, a bit like was the case in Ghost Protocol? Let's say that Jin is in jail because she got herself in there on purpose, because she heard that the Imperial pilot that tried to defect on orders of her dad is now locked in there, and now she fulfills her plan to break him out in order to find her dad. But then Cassian and the other rebels suddenly step in and take them to the rebel base, and then you figure out a way to go from there. Firstly, now Jin is instantly an active hero who is actively doing things. She has a clear objective to find her father. She is forced to make choices and actions in pursuit of that objective to show who she is as a person. She can still be captured and ordered around by the rebels, and it's not an issue because we know that she is after her dad on her own volition anyway, aka now she's not a boring empty shell. Secondly, now the plot can be established in a more visual, straightforward way. Now you can show the pilot being an Imperial prisoner for being a defector. Now you can have scenes with him and Jin and establish his relationship with her dad, like with some object he has from her dad or whatever, aka now the plot is something more tangible as opposed to this invisible thing occasionally occasionally mentioned by other people. Maybe you'll argue my version is not good, maybe you can back up your argument, that's fine, I'm sure there are better alternatives. But the main point of this is that we can have the exact same scenes and moments as before, but done in a way that is more interesting and clear and anchored in character. And hey, at the very least, it can't be worse than what we got. My dearest friends, we're quickly approaching the time where we all have to go be with our family and at least pretend we're not totally bored, which usually means no playing on phones and whatever.
Put that game down!
And that is why I have partnered with Audible to help you get through this. You all know Audible as the go-to place for all things audiobooks, and even though I'm not that into reading physical pages, audiobooks are pretty great, especially for this occasion. When your grandma is sitting next to you blabbing on about the most mundane bull, you can pretend to listen like a good grandchild, even though in reality you're listening to Bioshock Rapture, which by the way I recommend to every fan of the games. Right now you can get 3 months of Audible for just $6.95 a month, which is more than half off. Usually single audiobooks cost way more on their own, but with this you get to choose and keep any title each month. So make family holiday less boring and go to audible.com/Filmento or text Filmento to 500 500. Audible.com/Filmento, text Filmento to 500 500, or just, you know, click the link below.
Do it! Yes, you can!